Tractate Yevamos, General Introduction. If a man dies without children, the Torah commands his brother to marry his widow in order to establish a name for the dead brother, so that his name not be blotted out from Israel. This mitzvah is known as Yibum, and it is the subject of Tractate Yevamos. The law of Yibum is taught in the Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 through 10. When brothers dwell together and one of them dies, and he has no child, the wife of the deceased shall not be wed outside to a strange man. Her Yavam, brother-in-law, shall cohabit with her, and take her to himself as a wife, and perform Yibum with her. It shall be that the firstborn that she shall bear shall succeed to the name of his deceased brother, so that his name not be blotted out from Israel. But if the man will not wish to take his Yavama, sister-in-law, then his Yavama shall ascend to the gate to the elders and say, My Yavam refuses to establish a name for his brother in Israel. He did not consent to take me in Yibum. Then the elders of the city shall summon him and speak to him, and he shall stand and say, I do not wish to take her. Then his Yavama shall approach him before the eyes of the elders. She shall remove his shoe from him on his foot and spit before him. She shall speak up and shall say, So shall be done to the man who will not build the house of his brother. Then his name shall be proclaimed in Israel, the house of one whose shoe was removed. The concept of Yibum was known to our ancestors even before the Torah was given at Sinai. When Judah's son Er died without having children, Judah commanded his second son Onan to perform Yibum with Tamar, Er's widow, Genesis chapter 38, verse 8. Eventually, Judah himself performed the Yibum in verse 18, because in the generations before Sinai, the custom was to allow any of the deceased's close relatives to perform this mitzvah. Only once the Torah was given at Sinai was it restricted to the brother. See Rambam there. 1. The Law of Yibum. The Law of Yibum has several parts to it. The basic mitzvah to perform Yibum with the widow, the prohibition for her to marry anyone but her brother-in-law until he either performs Yibum or releases her, and the ceremony called chalitza for releasing her if he does not wish to marry her. A. Yibum. A man is generally forbidden to marry his brother's ex-wife, whether his brother divorced her or died, Leviticus chapter 18, verse 16. This prohibition is punishable by karas, a heavenly punishment, see Leviticus chapter 20, verse 21. However, when a brother dies without children, the Torah suspends this prohibition for the sake of the mitzvah of Yibum. The mitzvah applies only to brothers who share the same father. If they are brothers only through their mother, this mitzvah does not apply to them. See chapter 1, Mishnah 1, and Gemara 17b. The Yibum marriage takes effect through the brother and the widow having marital relations, cohabiting together. According to biblical law, the usual marriage ceremonies, chedushin and chuppah, see below, are neither necessary nor effective for Yibum. Yibum takes place only through cohabitation. However, for the sake of propriety, the rabbis decreed that the brother betrothed make kiddushin with the widow before performing Yibum with her. This pre-Yibum betrothal is called ma'amar. See the Gemara 52a. If he performs Yibum without first making ma'amar, however, the Yibum is still effective. Basic terms. The widow of a man who dies without children is known as a Yavama. Any brother of the deceased man who could perform Yibum is called a Yavam. The cohabitation between the Yavam and Yavama that fulfills the mitzvah and makes her his wife is called Yibum. The situation in which a man dies childless and his wife becomes subject to the law of Yibum is known as falling for Yibum. B. The prohibition to marry a stranger. The law of Yibum involves not only a mitzvah but also a prohibition. Although the wife of the deceased's brother is not a widow, she is not permitted to marry anyone other than one of her husband's brothers, as long as Yibum or chalitza is possible. See Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 5. Where Yibum is not possible because there are no brothers, or because the brothers died, or because she is not eligible for Yibum to them or they to her, then she is free to marry anyone. However, as long as Yibum or chalitza is possible, even one of the brothers, she may not marry anyone else. Basic term. The legal attachment between a widow, Yavama, and her husband's brother, Yavam, that prohibits her to marry anyone else is technically known as Zikia, or Zika. However, we will generally refer to it simply as Yibum bond. C. Chalitza. The Torah also provides a mechanism by which the widow can be released from her attachment to the brothers in case they all refuse to perform Yibum with her. This procedure is known as chalitza, taking off the shoe. See Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 9. It is described fully in chapter 12 of this tractate. This procedure ends the Yibum bond between the widow and all her husband's brothers and allows her to marry a stranger. Indeed, after Chalitza, the widow is forbidden to marry any of the brothers. See Gemara 10b, see Mishnah chapter 2, Mishnah 7, and introduction to chapter 5. Only Chalitza can release from the Yibum obligation. A regular divorce cannot. Nevertheless, if a brother should give the widow a get, document of divorce, it does have certain effect under rabbinic law. See below section 3d. Basic terms. The ceremony of taking off the shoe is known as chalitza. The widow who underwent this ceremony to end her Yibum bond is known as halutza, a halutza. D. Co-wives. Under Torah law, a man may be married to more than one wife at the same time. Should he die childless, none of the wives may marry out of his family until one of them has received either Yibum or chalitza. If a man has several brothers, all of them are eligible to perform either Yibum or chalitza. The mitzvah of Yibum is for one of the brothers to perform Yibum or Chalitza with one of the widows. Once Yibum has been performed with one of the widows, all the other widows are free to marry out of the family, and indeed, they are all forbidden in marriage to the brothers. Similarly, once Chalitza has been performed by one of the brothers with one of the widows, all the widows are free to marry out of the family, and they all become forbidden in marriage to any of the brothers. Basic term, sarot, co-wives. Two or more women who are married to the same man. 2. Exemptions from Yibum. The law of Yibum does not apply to every widow nor to every brother. There are many exceptions to the Yibum requirement. The one most frequently discussed in this tractate is the erva, a woman forbidden to cohabit with the Yavam under penalty of karas. A. Erva, plural, arayas. There are 21 women who are biblically forbidden to a man because they are related to him either by blood or by marriage, i.e. they are either his relatives, his wife's relatives, or the wife of his relatives. These are listed in Leviticus chapter 18. Cohabitation with any one of these forbidden relatives is punishable by karas if they deliberately violate the prohibition. Moreover, marriage cannot legally take effect between the erva and the man to whom she is related. See chapter 4, Mishnah 13. Of these 21 arayas, it is possible for 15 of them to have been married to a man's brother, i.e. they are an erva only to him but not to his brother. Thus, if that brother dies without children, it is possible for these ervas to fall for yivum to him. For example, a man's daughter is an erva to him but is permitted to marry his brother, her uncle. So if a man married his brother's daughter and then died without children, the widow would fall to her own father for yivum. Should this happen, they are excluded from Yibum, chapter 1, Mishnah 1. Only the prohibition against marrying a brother's former wife is suspended for the sake of Yibum. All other erva prohibitions remain in place and therefore prevent Yibum. The erva prohibition not only excludes the widow from Yibum, but exempts her from chalitza as well. Therefore, if a woman falls for Yibum to a man to whom she is an erva, she is free to remarry. However, if she is an erva to one surviving brother, but not to the others, she is excluded from Yibum and Chalitza only to that brother, but is still subject to Yibum or Chalitza from the other brothers. She can therefore not remarry until she has Yibum or Chalitza with one of these brothers. B. Co-wife of an erva. Not only is an erva excluded from Yibum, but so is her co-wife. Thus, if the brother who died had more than one wife at the time of his death, and one of them was an erva to the surviving brother, all the other wives are excluded from Yibum or Chalitza. Chapter 1, Mishnah 1. C. An erva from a previous Yibum situation. It is possible for a woman to fall to a brother for the Yibum more than once. For example, if she was married to one of 3 brothers and her husband died childless, she falls to the remaining 2 brothers for Yibum. If one of them marries her in Yibum and then he too dies childless, she falls for Yibum a second time to the last surviving brother. It is possible for a woman to be an erva to that last brother the first time she falls to him for Yibum, but not an erva to him the second time she falls to him. Nevertheless, since she was an erva to him the first time she fell to him, she is forbidden to him the second time she falls to him as well. This will be explained further in chapter 3, Mishnah 7. D. Other exclusions. There are a number of other circumstances that cause Yevama to be forbidden to her Yavam. There are also a number of instances in which a brother is not considered fit to perform Yibum. These, along with the laws that apply to them, will be explained in the Mishnahs in which they appear. 3. Rabbinic decrees. There are 4 rabbinic decrees that deal specifically with the Yibum relationship. These concern the Yevamos relationship with A, the woman who is bound to him for Yibum, known as his Zekuka; B, the woman to whom he gave Chalitza, known as the Halutza; C, the Yevama whom he betrothed with Ma'amar; and D, the Yevama to whom he issued a divorce. A, Zekuka. As explained above, any widow who has fallen to her brother-in-law for Yibum is linked to him inasmuch as she may not marry anyone else while awaiting his Yibum or Chalitza. This link is called Zika, and the widow in this context is called Zekuka. The terms Yevama and Zekuka mean the same thing, but Zekuka is used when referring to the widow in the context of her Yibum bond. The rabbi saw that ordinary people looked at the Yibum bond of a widow to her Yavam as somewhat like a marriage bond. To avoid confusion, they therefore decreed that this bond should be treated like a marriage bond in some respects. Based on this, they decreed that just as a man may not marry his wife's close relatives, e.g. sister, so too rabbinically he may not marry the close relatives, e.g. sister of his Zekuka. This Zekuka prohibition applies also to all the other relatives of a wife forbidden to a man, such as his wife's mother, grandmother, daughter, and granddaughter. This prohibition applies even when there are several brothers eligible to perform Yibum. The widow is considered a Zekuka to each of them, and they are forbidden to marry her close relatives. B. Halutza. When a Yavam performs Halutza with his Yevama, he ends the Yibum bond that existed between them. Accordingly, the rabbinic prohibition against marrying a Zekuka's relatives, described in the preceding paragraphs, ends with Chalitza. However, the rabbi saw that people looked at Chalitza as similar to divorce, and considered the Chalitza as an equivalent of a divorcee. To avoid the impression that a man may marry the close relatives of his wife after he divorces her, the rabbis prohibited marrying the close relatives of a Halutza as well, chapter 4, Mishnah 7. For example, if a man performed Chalitza with his Yevama, he is forbidden to marry his sister afterwards, just as a man may not marry the sister of the wife he divorced. Similarly, the rabbis prohibited the Halutza from marrying a Kohen, just as the divorcee is biblically forbidden to a Kohen. C. Ma'amar. As explained above in section 1a, biblically, Yibum takes effect only through cohabitation. However, for the sake of propriety, the rabbis decreed that the Yavam first betroth, giving her either an object of value such as a ring, or a marriage document. This act of pre-Yibum betrothal is called Ma'amar. Although this act is meaningless on the biblical level, the rabbis recognized it as a betrothal in some respects. For this reason, once one brother makes Ma'amar with a Yevama, none of the other brothers may marry her. Similarly, if the brother who betrothed her with Ma'amar wishes to end his relationship with her, he must give her a divorce to end the rabbinic state of marriage, as well as perform Chalitza with her to end the biblical Yibum bond. The dual nature of Ma'amar, biblically still Yevama, but rabbinically the wife of the Yavam, creates several unusual situations, which are discussed in chapters 2 through 5. D. Divorce. A widow is released from her Yibum bond only through Chalitza, a regular divorce. A get given by the Yavam to the Yevama has no significance on the biblical level. However, since many people think of a get and Chalitza as being equal, the rabbis decreed that if a Yavam gives his Yevama a get, it should be considered effective to some extent. For this reason, once the get is given by one brother to one widow, all of the other brothers are prohibited rabbinically to perform Yibum with any of the widows, as if Chalitza had been performed, see section 1d. However, the widows must still be released through Chalitza, since the get does not end the biblical Yibum relationship. Since such divorce is rabbinically recognized, it has other results as well. For example, it prohibits the Yevama from marrying a Kohen and prohibits the Yavam who gave her the divorce from marrying her relatives even after the Yibum bond ends. These points are more fully explained in chapter 5. 4. General rules of marriage. A. Kedushin, Erusin, Nisuin. According to biblical law, marriage takes place in 2 stages. The first stage is called Erusin, or Kedushin, while the second stage is called Nisuin. The terms Erusin and Kedushin apply both to the first level of marriage and to the act that brings it into being. We have translated this act as betrothal only for lack of a better English word. During the Erusin stage, the couple is legally married in most respects. The wife may not marry anyone else. If she cohabits with any other man, it is considered adultery, and if they wish to end their relationship, the husband needs to give her a regular divorce with a get. However, during this stage of marriage, the couple is not yet permitted to live together, and the rights and obligations of a married couple do not generally apply to them. Kiddushin or Rusin is established by the man giving the woman either money or an object of value such as a ring, or a document of marriage, or by cohabiting with her, all for the purpose of making her his wife. See Kiddushin chapter 1, Mishnah 1. The second stage of marriage is called Nisuin, full marriage. This takes place when the bride formally enters her husband's home or the bridal canopy. This procedure is called chuppah, and it completes the marriage process. In Mishnaic times, the Rusin period generally lasted a long time, often a year. See Kesubos, chapter 5, Mishnah 2. Following the Rusin ceremony, the bride returned to her father's home and remained there until the Nisuin. Later, it became customary to perform both stages of the marriage at the wedding, and this is the common practice today. If the husband dies childless during the Rusin period, his widow requires either yibum or chalitza. B. The kesubah and marital property rights. When a man marries a woman, he undertakes certain financial obligations toward his wife and gains certain property rights in return. These obligations and property rights are the subject of Tractate Kesubos and are elaborated in our introduction to that tractate. Some of these obligations are discussed in the later chapters of this tractate. They will be explained as they arise. Yevamos is widely regarded to be one of the most difficult tractates of the entire Talmud. This is largely because so many of its cases are very complicated. The learner must often keep track not only of the many relatives of both husband and wife, but also of their marriages, deaths, and remarriages, and the new relationships that result. We have tried to simplify these relationships as much as possible, often by resorting to assigning names to the various people involved in the cases. In addition, we have provided diagrams to help the reader picture these relationships. We have restricted the diagrams to those instances in which we felt that many people might have difficulty picturing the cases with just a verbal description. An introductory remark about these diagrams is in order. The diagrams were constructed to aid in understanding the notes they accompany and are meant to be understood only after reading those notes. However, in some of the very confusing cases, we have included explanations within the diagrams themselves. The following is an explanation of the symbols used within the diagrams. A square is a male, a circle is a female, a thick line is a marriage, thin descending line is offspring, gray arrow is proposed yibum, circled X and gray arrow is proposed yibum prohibited. As an aside, me, the narrator, host of this YouTube channel, highly recommends that you purchase the Mishnah Elucidated, because although I narrate just Bekitzer on a very broad level, the diagrams and all the notes are extremely helpful. You can go to artscroll.com to place your order. There's a link in the description box.